A Strange Christmas Eve by Sally Hayward. The lights on the Christmas tree were reflected in the TV screen, so that It's a Wonderful Life was temporarily and beautifully animated with Technicolor twinkling snow. Sarah shifted slightly so that she could see the original black and white images, unsullied by 21st century gaudiness. She loved Christmas lights, but she loved this magical old classic even more. Her concentration was fully and totally focused, as James Stewart begged Clarence to take him home and let him live and love again. As the credits rolled, so too did the tears down Sarah's cheeks. She never failed to sob at the ending, however many times she watched. Sighing, she leant back into the huge, comfy armchair and pulled the cosy, mustard-coloured blanket around her shoulders. Sarah loved everything about Christmas. The build-up, the endless lists, the decorations in town, Christmas songs on a loop. She even enjoyed the crowds, and trying to get parked at Meadowhall. Others became fed up and disillusioned way before the big day, but not Sarah. She was smiling as Ben appeared at the door, a puzzled look on his handsome face. "What are you grinning at?" He walked over and put his arms around Sarah, planting a soft kiss on her forehead. "Have you finished watching that soppy film?" Sarah smiled. "Yes, Ben, I've finished watching that soppy film. You should watch it with me one year. You'd love it." Ben snorted. Maybe. Or never." Sarah playfully pushed his arms as she rose to go to the kitchen. "Do you want a coffee? Oh, by the way, have you decided on my Christmas present yet? You know, the Christmas present to end all Christmas presents? Pretty sure I am top of that particular leaderboard." She licked her index finger and drew it downwards in the air. Ben paused in the act of opening the fridge door. "Actually, babe, that's where I've been today. Sorting out the best present you will ever have." He pulled a can of lager from the shelf, spraying foaming liquid onto the black stone-tiled floor. Normally Sarah would have yelled at Ben to clean the mess, but she was intrigued by what he'd just said. Every year for the 5 years of their relationship, as well as giving each other the usual chocolates, socks, etc., Sarah and Ben had enjoyed the increasingly competitive challenge of trying to outshock each other during the festive season. In the early years it had been things like wrapping all the furniture in cling film, Ben, or pretending to pour water on the MacBook, Sarah, using an old broken laptop in low light, or putting clear nail varnish on a bar of soap and leaving it in the shower, Ben, or putting grass seeds in the PC keyboard, Sarah, last year. The pranks were getting worse each year, and Sarah was aware that the grass keyboard one had not pleased Ben, whose pride and joy was his digital technology. However, that particular prank had been finally forgiven, and chalked up as the best one yet. Its success lay in the fact that Ben thought Sarah had forgotten to plan a prank, and had only realised a few weeks later, when grass started to grow through the keys of his beloved wireless keyboard. Sarah remembered being worried that she'd gone too far this time, although Ben assured her that he saw the funny side and indeed congratulated her on her cunning and ingenuity. Ben's prank last year had been to give Sarah a box of delicious-looking chocolates, which, as Sarah found out after taking a huge bite from a gorgeous-looking caramel, were actually made from soap. It had been hours before she could get the awful taste out of her mouth. Now it was only 2 days before Christmas, and Sarah was secretly planning this year's surprise. She was torn between putting cling film over the toilet bowl, maybe too tame, or pouring mayonnaise over Ben's beloved red Mini Cooper and pretending somebody had paint-bombed it. Risky after last year, but harmless really. She smiled when she imagined the utter shock that would appear on his face when he believed that somebody had ruined his pride and joy. Sometimes she thought Ben loved that car more than he did her. "So?" Sarah sidled up to Ben and kissed his cheek. "You know you aren't going to beat me, don't you?" Ben smiled and kissed Sarah full on the mouth. "Don't be so sure, you cheeky mare." He playfully swiped Sarah's leg, and soon they were kissing and hugging and laughing. Sarah loved Ben so much, and was so much looking forward to another Christmas with him by her side. On Christmas Eve, Ben was waiting for Sarah when she got home from a job at the call centre in town. They had made her work right up to the day before Christmas, and she was exhausted. The snow was piled up in the streets. The traffic was horrendous, nose to tail throughout Sheffield. The temperature had plummeted to -2, and everybody was tired, cold, fed up, and wanting to be tucked up on sofas, watching Christmas films and wrapping presents. Ben helped Sarah off with her coat and sat down on the sofa. "Sarah, my present to you this year is the best one ever." Seeing the look of incredulity on her face, he continued, "Really, it's ace. I've planned the best thing ever, but you've got to go out tonight to do it. It's not really a prank. It's something you've wanted to do for ages, so I thought it'd be nice to give you something proper this year." Sarah was slightly disappointed. Did this mean she wouldn't be able to deliver her well-planned prank after all? She couldn't prank Ben if he was actually giving her a proper gift, could she? "Oh, Ben, what have you got me?" Ben took a deep breath. "Okay, you know how much you're obsessed with that program, Most Haunted? You know how you cannot ever get tickets to visit that haunted house in Barnsley because they're so hard to get? The one that was on that episode we watched." Sarah's heart started beating faster. "Well, I've got you a ticket." Sarah clamped her hand to her face. "Ben, you're joking, seriously? Oh my God!" Ben smiled up at her. Sarah was jumping up and down and smiling. "Yes, I managed to get you a ticket. Cost me a bit, but you are definitely worth it. The only thing is, it's tonight. It's a special Christmas Eve tour. What do you think? I can drive you there and come and pick you up when it's finished?" "Tonight? Really? What about Christmas Eve and watching telly and doing stuff like we usually do? Wouldn't you mind?" Ben stood up and put his arms around Sarah. "All I care about is giving you something you really want. Go and get changed into warm clothes. I'll do you a flask and some sandwiches, and we'll get going in a bit. You have to be there by 10 p.m, and it will go on till about 3 a.m. Sarah kissed Ben passionately. "Ben, thank you so much, my darling. Wait till I tell the girls after Christmas. They'll be so jealous. Nobody can ever get tickets for 45 East Road." With that, she rushed into her bedroom to get changed, forgetting her tiredness in the excitement, and Ben went into the kitchen to start preparations for Sarah's night vigil in the most haunted house in Britain, or so the Daily Mail said. He was so pleased to have been able to do this for Sarah. Pranks were okay, but he had had enough of them for now. Especially after last year's grassy keyboard stunt. That had been an expensive joke. It had been his favourite keyboard as well. A pricey one, which he'd never been able to replace. A couple of hours later, and Ben was driving out of Sheffield with Sarah by his side. The traffic was still thick, people blasting their horns in impatient fury. The wipers couldn't keep up with the heavy snow which was now driving against the windscreens. The roads would be treacherous later on. Headlights blinded Ben from all directions. People hurrying to buy last-minute gifts and more food than they could possibly eat in one day. Ben sighed. It was all pointless, really. So much greed and anger, all for one lousy day of stuffing your face, arguing with your family, getting drunk and feeling like hell the morning after. Once out of Sheffield, the temperature dropped as they climbed into darkness, leaving the lights of the city behind them. Houses became fewer, and the stars tried to twinkle out of a snowy Christmas sky. Sarah looked at Ben, her eyes shining. "I can't believe you've done this. I'm a bit scared now, though. What will the other people be like? And what if I get scared? Will I be able to leave?" "Oh, I'm sure I'll be okay." Ben reached over and took her hand in his. "You are going to love it. If it gets too much, of course you can leave. But isn't the whole idea to be scared to death?" He looked ahead. 45 East Road was an ex-council house, set on its own at the end of a long, winding country lane. Other houses had been demolished, so it stood like a dark sentinel, awaiting its fate. Due to its notoriety, it had been allowed to remain standing, its claim to fame being that it was the scene of more paranormal activity than any other house in Britain. Planning officials had been trying to get it demolished, along with the rest of the houses in that row, and even now arguments were going back and forth between the city council and campaigners who wanted it left alone. So it still sat, a lone reminder of a road which was once teeming with life. Television companies often filmed here. Indeed, Most Haunted had conducted a live programme only a couple of months before. Sarah had sat on the edge of the sofa, eyes wide as Yvette and Carl had faced moving objects, voices, physical threats and shifting furniture. That night Sarah had insisted on leaving the hall light on, and she didn't get spooked too easily. Ben knew this was the perfect gift. Pulling up outside the house, Ben killed the engine and sat back. "You have to go in, and everybody else will be in there. They said to go in quietly, that they'll be waiting for you in the upstairs bedroom." Sarah swallowed. She really did feel nervous and wasn't so sure now that she wanted to go through with this. But she knew how difficult it was to get tickets for this place, and she knew that Ben must have pulled some strings to do this for her. She mustn't appear ungrateful. "Ben, how did you get the ticket?" Ben paused. "I know the guys who were demolishing the road. They were here when the film crew were doing that live episode. They managed to get hold of some tickets because they agreed to keep the noise down while the filming was going ahead. I was lucky." "But they filmed at night, surely?" "Yeah, but some of it was during the late afternoon, and they would have still been working. Why are the questions? Aren't you pleased with your present? You go on about this place enough." Now there was a slight tension in his voice, and Sarah instantly regretted quizzing him. "Sorry, babe, I am pleased. I just wondered, that's all." She leaned over and kissed his stubbly cheek. She would have to forget the prank present and just give him the beard trimmer this year, and she would have to try to wrap it in the early hours of the morning once she was back at home. They got out of the car, and the frigid night air wrapped itself around them like an ice coat. Sarah shivered and felt a faint stirring of real panic. Ben started walking towards the house. Its dark windows stared out like sightless eyes, and the gate hung off its hinges with the sadness of neglect. He didn't like this place, and couldn't wait to get back to the warmth of the flat and his PS4. "Ben, there aren't any other cars here. Do you think they've all got lifts like me?" "Yeah, I expect so. Come on, it's just gone 10. Sarah followed Ben through the rusting gate and up the broken path to the door. There was utter silence. Not a night bird, not a plane, no city sounds. Too far away for that. Just utter, dark, cold silence. At the door, Ben stopped and gave Sarah a quick hug. "This is where I leave. Not my thing and all that." He laughed softly, and Sarah relaxed. This was going to be such an experience. She could only imagine what Kim and Becky were going to say when she told them after Christmas. "Ben, do I really have to leave my phone with you? I'd rather have it with me." "Nah, the rule is no phones. They don't want you filming anything or disturbing the aura or whatever." He laughed and put a special emphasis on the word aura, which made Sarah laugh too. Ben put his hand over Sarah's mouth. "Shh, you don't want to wake the ghoulies." They were both giggling now, Ben almost on the floor and holding his stomach. It wasn't that funny, surely. Sarah turned, and suddenly Ben was back down the path and getting into the car. "Ben," she called as loud as she dared, "don't forget to come back and get me at 3. Don't leave me here to get eaten by the zombies." She heard his deep and throaty laugh as the Mini roared into life and drove away. Sarah was alone outside 45 East Road. She was excited, scared, apprehensive, but so excited. She had watched this house on Most Haunted. She had screamed along with Yvette and hidden behind a cushion as Carl was grabbed and pulled up a stairway. And now she was actually here. She hoped the others were nice and friendly, and not as nervous as she was. She couldn't cope with a lot of screamers and panickers. She reached forward and pushed the door. It slowly opened inwards on creaking hinges, its bottom catching on the old lino flooring. The scraping sounded almost like a moan, and Sarah felt her heart flutter. She stepped in. She felt it as soon as the door shut behind her. A darkness, a malevolence. She could almost taste it. She had always prided herself on being a sensitive one who could feel vibes, good and bad. She knew that she was going to be an important part of tonight's team. She hoped that the others would look to her and allow her to maybe lead the investigation. Now she was starting to feel the adrenaline pumping through her muscles, and she moved forwards to stop the aching in her legs. She needed to channel that energy. Moving towards the staircase, she slowly looked up. There was one small, very insipid yellow light coming from the upper landing, and she guessed this must be the bedroom where the other people were waiting. She was tempted to look about downstairs and peek tentatively into the kitchen, which was surprisingly pretty and normal. In the dark she could just make out an old-fashioned formica table, worktops bordered by frilly curtains, and a cupboard just like the one her Nana used to have. The back door window showed a dark expanse of garden, slightly illuminated by that weak light coming from upstairs. She stepped back into the hallway and looked into what she saw to be the living room. She could just make out the shapes of a sofa, 2 armchairs and a coffee table. Very retro. Lots of shops in Sheffield's Cathedral Quarter would ask a fortune for stuff like that. Suddenly, a soft voice came from upstairs. Sarah jumped out of her skin and backed out of the living room. She craned her neck and listened. Was it a voice? Sarah. A whisper, definitely coming from upstairs. They must be waiting for her. She stood at the bottom of the staircase and was just about to put a foot on the first step when a thought occurred to her. Was this one of Ben's pranks? Had he well and truly outpranked her this time? She didn't know what to do. Surely Ben wouldn't go to all this effort to set her up in a haunted house and get people to wait and call to her. But then again, this competition had been going on for some years, and she secretly thought that Ben was still harbouring a grudge over last year's grass keyboard incident. No. She had seen the official ticket for tonight's event. She had it in her pocket. She knew this was a proper investigation because she'd been trying to get a ticket for at least a year. She knew how hard they were to get. Just to be sure, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the small piece of paper. A genuine ticket, priced at £85. He'd spent all that money on her, and here she was doubting him. He knew she loved this sort of thing, and he was almost certainly very happily on his way back to his PS4 and a takeaway, while she froze in this dark and scary house. She smiled, and decided that she was going to just enjoy this experience. Sarah. There it was again. Sarah started climbing the stairs, noticing how loud the creaking was. Every step seemed to make a sound, and it only added to the fetid and clawing atmosphere in this place. As she neared the top, she noticed the breath coming out of her mouth, and realised that the temperature had dropped even further. It was truly freezing, and she wished now that she'd brought a blanket, some more socks, and her thick woolly hat. She was going to freeze tonight. Maybe one of the others had a hip flask with some rum or brandy. That would be lovely. A different voice this time. Is Sarah coming? We've already waited a long time for her. Sarah stared at her watch face in the gloom and saw that she was only a few minutes late. What did he mean? That they had waited a long time for her? She moved a little faster and found herself standing on a small upper landing, giving out to 3 doors. One door was slightly ajar, with that sulphurous cold light seeping round the edge of the lintel. She stepped forward and put her hand on the doorknob. A small laugh came from inside. Come in, Sarah. We don't bite. She stepped through into a medium-sized bedroom containing a bed and a wardrobe, with a small bedside table upon which a lamp stood, emitting the soft, unfriendly glow which she had seen from downstairs. Hello, she said brightly, realising her voice was quite shaky. She couldn't see anybody. Had her eyes been affected by the darkness? She stood still and allowed her eyes to adjust, and slowly she could make out shapes. A person in the corner, sitting on a chair, another person sitting on the bed, and 2 more standing by the window. She smiled and looked around her. Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I thought there would be more of us. The figure in the chair got up, holding out a hand. Hello, Sarah. It's lovely to meet you at last. We've been waiting for you to get here so we could get started. I'm Gregory. Sarah reached to shake his hand, but he sat back down, and she felt embarrassed and a bit silly. Hello, Sarah, from the bed. Nice to meet you, Sarah, from the window. Sarah put her bag down next to the bed and looked around for somewhere to sit. There didn't appear to be anywhere, so she stood, rather self-consciously, and leaned back on the wall. Sarah, this from the person sitting on the bed, tell us a bit about yourself. Sarah felt that all eyes were on her, and she coughed and smiled. I'm not very interesting. I work in the city and I live with Ben. That's my boyfriend. And my family all live near Bakewell. And of course I love Most Haunted. She laughed, but nobody joined in. Oh God, she thought, this is going to be fun. She looked around in the gloom. So what do we do? Do we just sit here, or do we walk around the house like Yvette and Carl? Go in teams, or should we have a chat first? She knew she was talking too much. She always did when she was nervous, and she was feeling unbelievably nervous now. She wasn't sure she liked these people. She couldn't see them properly, and they didn't seem that friendly. She wasn't sure she could stick this for the next 5 hours. The voice from the bed spoke again, a soft female voice. I'm Hester. Gregory is my brother. We like doing this. Hi, Hester. Nice to meet you. Now Sarah could see the woman's face. It was pale with huge dark eyes. A very pretty face. Her hair was scraped back into a bun, and she wore dark clothes and had a blanket over her knees. Sensible. Come and sit with me, Sarah. You can share my blanket. Sarah smiled. Hester must have read her mind. She moved over and sat down beside Hester and felt instantly better. The blanket was placed across her knees, and she could feel Hester's breath on her neck. Is that better, Sarah? Oh, yes, thank you. It's so cold, isn't it? Gregory spoke again. The two by the window are Henry and Clara. They are a bit quiet, but they always join us at these events. Say hello, you two. A muffled voice sounded from the direction of the window. Whether it was Henry and Clara offering a greeting, Sarah couldn't tell. Suddenly she felt like giggling. Honestly, when she told the girls about this strange bunch, they would howl with laughter. She could imagine it now, sitting in Costa, relating this unbelievable Christmas Eve tale. If she could see more clearly, she just knew that Henry and Gregory would be dressed in cagoules, with woolly hats and thermal gloves. The women would have thick tights and tweedy skirts and sensible haircuts under black berets. Sarah had to stop herself from laughing out loud. What would the girls say if they knew Sarah was here, doing this while they were probably at home right now, a glass of wine, wrapping presents in front of the fire? They were going to get the surprise of their lives when she told them. She would have texted from the car, but Ben had already confiscated her phone, adamant that she was going to experience this authentically, as he had put it. Sarah felt better now. Okay, they were a bunch of weirdos, but then again, so was she. She must be, agreeing to do this. She relaxed a little and looked over at Gregory, who appeared a bit clearer now. Her eyes must be getting more accustomed to the gloom now, and she could make out that he had a dark jacket of some kind, and that his face was covered with a huge beard. He held something in his hand. A walking stick? Looking back towards Hester, Sarah could now make out that she was wearing the prettiest earrings. Glinting in the dark, they were in the shape of small birds, and they dangled almost to her shoulder. Hester, I love your earrings. Where did you get them? In town? Hester turned slowly and smiled sadly. No, dear. My father gave them to me when I was 21. I've treasured them ever since and will never take them off. Strange old bat, thought Sarah, still highly amused by the strange company and the even stranger Christmas Eve. A silence settled in the room, and Sarah wondered what was going to happen. She'd never been to anything like this before, and didn't know what the protocol was. She decided to just wait and soak up the atmosphere. It was definitely a spooky place. She felt truly scared and hadn't really expected to. Whether it was the fact that the house stood on its own or was so dark, or whether it was the weirdness of the people here, or just the fact she'd been so influenced by the TV programme about this most famous haunted house, she didn't really know which. Was it the power of suggestion? Whatever it was, the atmosphere seemed to be changing by the second. Sarah tried to think about Ben and the Christmas tree at home, the cosy fire and all the brightly wrapped presents under the tree. She wished now that she hadn't played last year's trick on Ben. It had been such an expensive keyboard, and even though he tried to hide it, she knew that deep down he was really upset and angry about it. When she got back home, she would tell him how sorry she was, and get him to agree to stop playing pranks on each other. It was getting a bit tiring now anyway. trying to think of bigger and better tricks each Christmas. It would be nice just to have a normal Christmas like everyone else. Sarah began to feel truly uncomfortable and looked around at the others in the room. They appeared in darkness again. And she rubbed her eyes. Everything seemed a bit blurry, and she had to be careful not to dislodge her contact lenses. She'd brought spare ones, but thought she would be okay as long as she didn't fall asleep. Not much chance of that here, though. "Greg, are we just going to sit here? Aren't we going to explore the house? That's what Yvette always does." Gregory turned and his face became illuminated again. "We usually stay in this room, Sarah. It's better like that." "Oh, won't it be a bit boring, though? Do you think we'll see anything? Hear anything?" Hester shifted beside her. "Be patient, Sarah. Something always happens. You just have to wait." From the window, 2 assenting voices spoke in unison.
"Oh yes, Hester. Something does always happen. We just have to wait."
Sarah felt like she was in a club she didn't belong to, and realised that this bunch must do these investigations on a regular basis because they all obviously knew each other. She was sad because she'd hoped for a lively, fun bunch of relatively young people who would have a laugh with her. This lot were dire. No fun at all. She reached down and got the flask out of her bag. The sandwich box was nestled next to it, and she realised that she was ravenously hungry. Opening the flask, she immediately realised that it was empty. The sandwich box was the same. Damn it! She was so hungry, and she could murder a hot coffee. Ben had pranked her after all. By sending her to this place with a bunch of boring idiots and no food or drink to make it even slightly bearable. Maybe the game was back on after all. Sarah laughed, a laugh without much humour in it. I don't suppose any of you has got a cup of something hot to spare? My loving boyfriend seems to have played a trick on me. Empty flask and empty sandwich box. Funny, eh?" Hester sidled even closer. "We don't need food and drink, dear. You'll be fine without." "But I'm cold, and I really fancy a hot coffee." Sarah was beginning to wonder at the sense of this whole plan. She couldn't leave, as she didn't know exactly where she was. She had no phone to call Ben or even a taxi, and he had paid a lot of money so she could be here. She didn't know whether she wanted to be here anymore, though. Looking into the sandwich box again, as if she could conjure a ham and mayonnaise panini, she saw that there was something nestling in the corner of the plastic container. It was a small piece of paper, screwed up tightly into the size of a postage stamp. She pulled it out and unfolded it. 7 folds. She'd been told by her dad that you could only ever fold a piece of paper 7 times, no matter how big the piece of paper was. She tried it many times and found that she couldn't fold it any more than 7 times. Her dad was right. She had told Ben and they'd laughed. He had folded this paper 7 times. Perfect folds. A tiny piece of origami. She pointed the paper towards the meagre light and could just make out the words scrawled in Ben's awful handwriting. Just 4 words. Only 4. I loved that keyboard. Oh. That was strange. So strange. What did he mean? He must still be angry. She knew he was, but why write it on a piece of paper and not put any sandwiches in? A feeling such as he had never experienced before overtook her entire body. A tremble, a creeping fear ran down her back, up her sides, through her stomach, across her face, down into her hands, which were now trembling. Gregory, I think I have to go home. Something's happened. I don't think I can stay now. I'm sorry, but I haven't got my phone. I don't know what to do." Sarah could hear herself babbling, and she knew that she had never felt fear like this before in her entire life. It had consumed her, and she couldn't understand where it had come from. It was all-encompassing. Every inch of her was frightened, and the worst thing was that she didn't know what she was frightened of. All she knew was that she needed to get home and talk to Ben, tell him she was sorry and she didn't want to play this stupid game anymore. She knew the panic was going to take her over very shortly unless she could get a hold of herself. She turned to Hester. "Hester, you know how it is. I really need to get back now. Is that okay?" Only Hester was no longer sitting beside her. Sarah hadn't felt her get up from the bed, but the blanket just lay limply and flatly over the old-fashioned candlewick bedspread. Nana had one of those too. Sarah remembered the joy of staying with Nana and snuggling up on a cold winter's morning under a pink candlewick, the most comfortable, cosy blanket in the world. Snuggled next to Nana, safe and warm. Raising her head but not wanting to, Sarah's eyes made out 4 figures standing at the doorway, just standing in a row, dark and silent. Now they didn't seem like just a bunch of strangers, nerds obsessed with the paranormal like her, fans of Most Haunted and carriers of ghost monitoring machines and ESP meters. Now they seemed like 4 terrifying things, standing, blocking her way out. Sarah stood and heard her voice come out of her mouth like a strangled whisper. "Can you let me out, please? I really want to go home. It doesn't matter about the money. I'll pay it back to Ben, please." She took a step forward, but could feel hope dying in her chest. Gregory, or it could have been Henry, they all looked alike now, spoke. The voice which had issued from him was deep, echoey, as if from far away. "It's all right, Sarah. We promised Ben we would take care of you. Didn't we, Hester?" By his side, a slightly smaller figure moved. "Oh, yes, brother. We did promise that. After all, we have waited here for such a long time, and we always keep our promises." The 2 voices in horrific unison spoke. "We have waited for such a long time, such a very long time." Gregory put his hand out as if beckoning. "We have always been here, Sarah. Always. You can join us now. Wait with us." The 4 figures slowly moved towards Sarah, muttering and whispering in their strange, wrong voices, their tone weaving up and down in a diabolical lyric of terror. "Wait with us, Sarah. Wait with us. We always wait. Always." The last thing which went through Sarah's mind before she succumbed to indescribable terror and madness and dark oblivion was that she was going to miss Christmas. And what a stupid way to die, and how the girls would not believe what had happened to her. In the city, the lights glint and twinkle. Revellers stumble out of pubs, drunk on the Christmas spirit. All around the town, mothers tuck their children into bed as they try to sleep amid the unbearable excitement of Christmas morning. Last-minute presents are wrapped in front of fires, frosty windows keeping out the cold of the snow and keeping in the sounds of Christmas music, laughter and joy. Ben plays on his PS4. Headphones on, music blaring, empty cans and greasy takeaway boxes littering the carpet. An open beer bottle resting on the arm of the sofa, some of the liquid already soaking into the brand new red chenille fabric. Sarah would kill him if she could see it. He laughs.